Today, we're diving into a really chilling true story, one that takes us deep into the remote Siberian wilderness. It's a story about a horrific crime, sure, but it's also about a fight for the truth that would last for decades and expose a darkness you just won't see coming. It all starts with this, a brutal, shocking scene. But here's the thing, the story you think you're about to hear, it's not what happened here, not even close. So let's set the scene. We're in a place called Kisnet. It's so small you probably couldn't even find it on a map. We're talking about a tiny little settlement of just 24 people, mostly railway workers and their families, completely surrounded by miles and miles of dense forest. The only thing connecting them to the outside world is a single railway line. Okay, so it's the middle of the night, about 1:40 a.m. Two brothers, Vadim and Igor Supranko, are driving a massive 70-car freight train through the forest. Suddenly, their headlights catch something up ahead on the tracks. They blast the horn, they slam on the emergency brakes, but a train that big, that heavy, it's not going to stop quickly. They brace for impact, and then they hear it, this absolutely sickening sound of steel wheels crushing whatever was in their path. The train finally screeches to a stop. The brothers, they grab their lanterns, they climb down from the cab, probably thinking they hit a deer or some other animal. But what they find scattered all over the tracks, it's a scene of just absolute horror, the dismembered remains of several people. And once the scene is finally processed, the victims are identified. There's 7 boys, all 15 years old, all good friends from a nearby town. These were just kids, you know? They were out on a little weekend adventure, collecting cedar cones in the forest. A completely innocent trip that ended in the most horrific way imaginable. So the local police show up, and almost immediately they seem to have it all figured out. They declare it a tragic accident and get ready to close the case, like shockingly fast. But the story they were selling, well, it just didn't make any sense. Okay, so the official police theory was simple. The boys were tired, their train was late, so they just laid down on the tracks and fell asleep. Case closed. But come on. If they just fell asleep, why were their backpacks found 250 meters away, laid out in a neat little line? The train drivers even said the bodies looked like they'd been placed there on purpose. And the biggest red flag of all, the toxicology reports came back completely clean. No drugs, no alcohol. The families knew right away this was no accident. For 2 solid years, the families fought and fought, but they just kept hitting a brick wall. The local police ignored them, evidence mysteriously disappeared. So in 1991, they do something pretty desperate. They write a letter directly to the president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, and they just beg him to find the truth. And you know what? It actually worked. So Moscow sends in the A-team, 2 of their best investigators. But by now, the crime scene is 2 years old, it's completely useless, but one of the investigators, Guzenkov, he's known for cracking impossible cases. He knows the truth isn't on the tracks anymore, it's buried with the boys. So he makes a really bold call, exhume the bodies. And this is the moment the entire case just gets blown wide open. The new autopsies are horrifyingly clear. The train didn't kill these boys. The train just mutilated bodies that were already dead. They had been brutally beaten to death. We're talking fractured skulls, broken jaws, long before that train ever came down the tracks. And it gets worse. The forensic team realized the injuries pointed to specific types of weapons, heavy, blunt instruments. The kind of tools, hammers, heavy wrenches, that you would find lying around in any railway depot. This was no accident. This was a full-blown murder investigation. With this new evidence and intense new questioning, a railway lineman finally cracks. He confesses everything, and he names the whole crew. But the most shocking name on that list, the man he says was the ringleader, a senior police lieutenant named Nikolai. So the question is, why? Was it a robbery? No. It was boredom. The group was drunk, they were looking for trouble, and they confronted the boys. The police lieutenant, Nikolai, he just made up a reason to start a fight, accusing them of messing with the railway signals. He hit one of the boys, things escalated, and then he gave the chilling order, kill them all, leave no witnesses. And then, using his police training, he showed them how to stage the bodies to make it look like an accident. So fast forward to 1995. 6 years after the murders, the killers are finally tried, convicted, and sentenced. It seems like justice has finally been served. But for the families, their nightmare was a long, long way from over. You're not going to believe this. The killers get the death penalty. But just 1 year later, Russia joins the Council of Europe and gets rid of capital punishment. And in a move that is just mind-blowing, the Supreme Court doesn't just lower the sentences, it overturns them completely. The murderers walk free. And almost as soon as they're out, people connected to the case start turning up dead. A very clear message was being sent. So now, you've got convicted murderers walking the streets and witnesses dying. You'd think that's it, right? But these families, they refuse to be silenced. In 1999, they launch one last desperate appeal to the government. And this kicks off another grueling 4-year investigation. And get this, while the families are still fighting for justice, the ringleader, the ex-cop Nikolai, what does he do with his freedom? He gets himself elected as a local municipal deputy. A convicted mass murderer was now a politician. Unbelievable. So after decades of fighting, after all this corruption and heartbreak, what did the final verdict look like? Well, it all comes down to these numbers. First, remember the 7 boys, 7 lives just gone. In 2003, the final sentences are handed down. For the ringleader, that police officer Nikolai, and for the man whose confession broke the case wide open, their new sentence was just 10 years in prison. And another one of the main killers, he got only 7 years. That's 1 year in prison for each young life he helped to destroy. It wasn't justice, it was just a final slap in the face. You know, in the end, this story isn't really about a failed justice system, it's about the unbelievable strength of these families. For more than a decade, they fought against a system that wanted to just sweep their sons' murders under the rug. They never, ever gave up. And because of them, the truth of what happened that night finally came out. And this case just leaves you with this really tough question, doesn't it? When the very people who are supposed to protect you are the ones committing the crimes, what does a word like